Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Thomas, and welcome to the second episode of Magic Threads Connection Through String, where I talk about the fiber world and the incredible connections that people form there, and how those connections are what are kind of keeping us okay, relatively okay in this world right now. Yeah, the world is a mess and genocides and transphobia and racism and all of the things that can be so exhausting. But every time I spend time with my people or with people in the fiber world, it reminds me that, there is good in the world and that connection and love are what's going to save us. Last time I talked a little bit about my own personal connections to fiber. My grandmother, who taught me how to knit. Um, Today I'm going to share a story that is has a really cool fiber connection, which when it didn't start out that way, but it sort of ended that way. It's the story of how I came to get my CPW spinning wheel. CPW is Canadian production wheel. It's an antique spinning wheel that was made in Canada. And I've always really wanted a CPW from the time I started spinning. If I was going to have an antique wheel, that was the one I wanted. And now I have one, and it's because of an incredible connection I made as a teenager before I even thought about trying to spin when I wasn't even knitting or anything. Um, I guess I'll just dive in. I'm going to throw this warning up. There's going to be swearing. Swearing is an integral part of this story. So if that isn't for you, then maybe give this one a pass, but you'll be missing out on an incredible story. I also want to give a shout out to my friend Curdy for encouraging me to tell this story. It all started in northern New Brunswick, where I'm from. My mom worked at a nursing home, and at that nursing home, there was a gentleman named Jim, and he lived in the apartments attached to the nursing home. And he and I sort of became friends. I would often end up there after school, after activities or whatever, waiting to get a drive home with my mom because we lived out in the country. And Jim and I became buddies. We would play crib all the time. And in grade 12, he found out that I was going to Mount Allison University, which is in Sackville, New Brunswick. I talked a little bit about it last time. And he let me know that his daughter, Marilyn, lived in Sackville, and that he made sure he came the next time he saw me, he had her name and phone number written on a little piece of paper and was like, you have to look her up when you get there. And I was, 17, 8, almost 18, and looking up this elderly man's daughter was not really my priority. I just, I said, sure, sure. Yeah, I'll absolutely look her up. Then I got to Mount Allison, was my first year of university, and, things went by the wayside, and I never gave Marilyn a call. And come to be, it's the last night of school. My parents are on their way to pick me up, and I wake up that morning after having gone out the night before, and I drank a fair amount. I was pretty hungover, hadn't started packing. My room was a disaster. Like it was a bad scene. All of a sudden the hall phone rings. So for those of you who aren't ancient like I am, back when we had, you know, phones that were connected to walls, not all university students had their own phone in their bedroom. So we had a, kind of group phone in the hallway, like for our whole floor to use. So the hall phone rang, didn't think anything of it because we had a phone in our room. And all of a sudden, someone's yelling down the hall, Jen, the phone's for you. And I was like, who's calling me on the hall phone? So I walk out into the hall and I answer the phone, gravelly voice, probably, yeah, sound like I smoked 3 packs of cigarettes, like, because it was the 90s. There was still smoking in bars. It was a bad scene. And I hear this voice saying, Jennifer Thomas. No one calls me Jennifer except my mother, and apparently Marilyn. Because that's who was on the phone. And so I just hear this voice, and she's like, Jennifer Thomas, I've been keeping track of you all year. She apparently went to church with my dons of my residence. So she's like, I've been keeping track of you. I have a package that I need to send home to my dad, and you're going to take it for me. And I'm on my way to see you right now. I was like, what is happening right now? Who is this person? And I was like, okay, so I'm like frantically, I run back to my room. I'm frantically trying to clean stuff up and try to make it somewhat presentable, which it was not going to be. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go down and meet her. I don't even get to the end of my hallway. She somehow managed to get into my locked residence, and I hear this voice yelling, Jennifer Thomas, I'm here. And I was like, who is this woman? And she rounds the corner, and Marilyn is like 5 foot nothing, and she has snow white hair. And she just turns the corner. And so she like is, kind of giving me crap for not calling her all year. And I was just like trying to appease her, smile, nod, get the box for her dad that I was taking home, and, send her on her merry way. Promising that I would call her the next year, yada, yada, yada. Um, that was my introduction to Marilyn. So then the legend of Marilyn was born, because as I'm walking her down the hallway, um, one of my friends, there's a group of my friends who were left. They were all sitting in a room, and they're talking to each other. The doors open like a tiny little bit, and someone says, Fuck, you were so fucking loud last night. And Marilyn stops in her tracks, and I am horrified, horrified, because I'm like, what is happening? She's hearing my friends swear. I know she's like a church lady. What is happening? Then Marilyn turns around, marches over to the door of this residence room, and pushes it open. And I am mortified. I want the ground to just open up and swallow me whole. I am so embarrassed. Remember, I'm 18. And she walks into this room and full of my friends. And she goes, Do you know what she's like, I heard you saying that word. And I was like, oh God. And she said, I have a story to tell you. It's like, what is happening right now? She said, I was on the train going to Campbellton. Do you know where Campbellton is? And of course, everyone knew where that was because that's my hometown. And they were like, yeah, yeah, we know where Campbellton is. She said, well, I was on the train to Campbellton, and there were two young men sitting in front of me, and it was fuck this and fuck that. There were fucking tires, there were fucking bottles. And finally, I'd had enough. And I just turned to them and said, Excuse me, do you know what that word means? It means to copulate, to make love, to have sex. Bottles can't fuck, tires can't fuck. And there is dead silence in the room, because no one knows what to say at this point, because there is this tiny little old lady who just was swearing her ass off at us. And we were all just staring at her. And then she just turns to me and says, Don't you dare tell my father I said that word. And she turns around and walks out. And we're all just sitting there going, what just happened? Like, what is happening right now? And that was Marilyn. That she became known from that moment on for my whole 4 years that I lived in Sackville and went to Mount A as the fuck lady. And she wore that title with pride. She thought it was hilarious that all of my friends referred to her as such. And she um I will say I called her the next year because, guess what? She was a force to be reckoned with, and I didn't think she was going to take me not calling her super well. From like the next 3 years that I lived in Sackville, she became my surrogate grandmother. She had me over for dinner. She would take me out for cheesecake. She would, you know, house sit some plants for my friends while we were on spring break or Christmas. She just became part of my life in Sackville. And she was always just this vivacious person who was not afraid to give her opinions about anything. And I just have so many great memories of Maryland. Like I remember coming home um from either class or library, I can't remember. I was out and I came home, and apparently Marilyn had been there because there was a care package for my mother. She had been at home visiting her dad. There was a care package for my mother, and she had taken the clothes that were on my floor in my residence room and like made a person sitting in my bed out of the box and my clothing, and like no note, nothing. But of course I knew it was Marilyn because it was a care package for my mom. And she was also really great. She showed up once when I was having some trouble with a landlord, and he was really aggressive and not nice. And she and her husband Vaughn came over to visit while the landlord was there to try to, um, just show that we had some support of adults. And yeah, she just became a really big part of my life in Sackville. And of course, I saw Jim every time I went home. And then I left Sackville and I was living in Fredericton for a couple of years, Fredericton, New Brunswick, before I moved to Calgary. And it was actually, I believe it was New Year's Day 2000. I'm pretty sure that was when it was. I get a phone call from my mom, letting me know that Jim had passed away. And so that I was really sad about that. And I still had some time off, before I had to go back to school. And I decided my friend was visiting for New Year's and he just happened to be living at home then. And so I got a ride home with him to go to Jim's funeral. And so I went to the funeral. Out of nowhere, into the funeral walks one of my really close friends from high school, Christopher. And we were, we kind of both looked at each other and I was like, why are you here? Well, so Marilyn was his mom's cousin or um, or yeah. Anyway, Marilyn Marilyn was his mom's cousin, I believe, is how that went. But yeah, so here's this connection that neither of us knew, that he had no idea that I knew Marilyn or Jim for that matter. I had no idea that he was related to Marilyn. And so yeah, that was the first sort of weird connection other than our initial connection and her becoming the fuck lady for eternity. After I moved to Calgary, we kept in contact. Marilyn, I send out Christmas cards every year. And Marilyn's was always the one that most of them were just like, hey, hope everything's well, sign my name, carry on. Marilyn's, I actually sat down and took my time and gave her updates just on my life. from the time yeah, what I was doing for work, when I met my partner, um, when we got married, all of that kind of stuff when we had kids. I would just give her updates every year. And I always looked forward to getting her card as well. And then my partner, I don't remember. It was right after we got married. I was doing massage school and it was spring break. And my partner just happened to be he was working in Amherst, Nova Scotia, which is just across the border from Sackville. It's about a 10-minute drive. So I decided to go to Sackville for spring break. We stayed there. He drove over to work during the day and I just hung out. I had schoolwork. And of course, um, had a few visits with Marilyn while I was there. And one of those visits, she gave Paul and I a couple of teacups from her parents, which would have been Jim, her parents' wedding china. And I still have those teacups and I cherish them. Yeah, so that was just a lovely little, you know, taste of Marilyn giving us her parents' wedding china. Yeah, we just kept in contact. We, a couple of times, she met my kids a couple of times when we would go to PEI when we were in New Brunswick visiting my family, and we stopped and met them for lunch. And then, for my 40th birthday, I went out east to spend some time with my best friend from high school. And she and I met in Halifax. We spent the weekend in Halifax, celebrated our 40th together. I was flying out of Moncton, so I drove through and I had contacted Marilyn ahead of time and said, hey, let's meet up. Um, and at that point, I knew she wasn't doing great. Her husband also wasn't in the best health. But we had a grand old time. We went out for lunch. When I went to go pick her up, I had told her, like, it was right after I'd started Fiber Goddess and I was telling her about my business and how it was going. And the first thing she did when I went to go pick her up for lunch was she brought me in and she brought me into her living room. And I'd been in this living room countless times before and I never noticed because, of course, I just didn't notice. Um, Her spinning wheel was sitting there and she told me that she had like done spinning for years and um yeah she was so proud to show me her spinning wheel and just this connection that I had no idea that we had. I had no idea that she had been involved in fiber arts at all. It was just nothing, it's something that never came up. And so it was such a cool connection that we now had was that, yeah, we had both um, been spinners or were spinners. And and one of the things she gave me that day, for those of you who are listening, I'm holding up a book. It's called Hand Spinning by Alan Fannin. And she gave me this book. And on the inside, um, there's a little dedication and it says to Marilyn with love following the Ottawa trip, February 28th, 1975, Vaughan. And so I'm assuming that's probably when she got her wheel and started getting interested in spinning. And then she wrote that it was regifted on July 16th, 2017. Um, to my friend Jennifer Thomas, well done, Jen, on your knitting wool entrepreneurship. Keep up the good work. Anyway, um, it's it's one of my most cherished possessions that I have this piece of history, um, and as a gift from her. Um, so yeah, that was like the best 40th birthday gift ever. And just having the day to spend with her, we drove around to some of my old haunts and residences and did a lot of remembering that day and laughing at the shenanigans, including, the fuck lady story and um, the night I burned my bra in the Catholic church parking lot. Um, in my defense, it was a shared parking lot with my residents, so it wasn't like I was targeting the Catholic Church. Anyway, yeah, so that was the last time I actually saw Marilyn in person. So I'm really glad we had such a great visit that day, and we made that fiber arts connection that I just had no idea had even existed. And then fast forward a few years, we stayed in contact. Vaughn passed away during that time. And that year was the first year I didn't get a card from Marilyn. So I knew that things weren't great, but kept sending, Christmas cards, giving her updates on my family and myself and my business and everything. And then a few years ago, I got a call from my friend Chris to let me know that Marilyn had passed away. And I was super sad. And, she lived a fantastic life. And I was thinking about her spinning wheel. And as we know, as fiber arts people, spinning wheels tend to get either tossed or um sold as decorations, etc. It's so I decided to just let Chris know that, if no one was wanting her spinning wheel, that I was really interested in having it. I didn't want to, step on toes. I didn't want to assume anything. And he let me know that his mom's sister and her husband were actually the executors of Marilyn's estate. So he said he was going to talk to his Aunt Eileen. And so, anyway, I didn't really, I had no idea if anything was going to come of it because, yeah, like I said, I wasn't a close relative. I didn't want to assume anything. I also knew that the chances of, um, it just, getting donated or whatever were also high. And I felt a connection with Marilyn and her and our shared fiber arts history. And so Chris let me know that, yeah, and Aunt Eileen said that, yeah, for sure I could have it. Then it was during the pandemic also. So there was like, she was going to bring it to his mom's house, and then my mom was going to pick it up and my parents were going to store it, all of that stuff. But because it was the pandemic, it didn't happen. And then, I was sort of feeling bad because I knew that it was just sitting at Eileen's house. And all of a sudden I got, it was that next holidays, and I got a Christmas card, and I opened it up and it was a card from Marilyn and a note from Eileen, saying that she'd found the card while she was cleaning out Marilyn's house and decided to send it on. Obviously Marilyn hadn't gotten around to sending it. Um, to say I cried that day would be an understatement. I got one last card from Marilyn and also connected with Eileen, who, I didn't know if she even knew who I was. The the note in the card let me know that she absolutely knew exactly who I was. Marilyn had spoken of me. She'd heard about me through Christopher. So suddenly that connection was there as well that I wasn't really expecting, and it was really lovely. And so at that moment, I decided that I was going to send Eileen a Christmas card every year with a little note. And so I've kept that up over the last few years. Then the first time we went back east, kind of, not post COVID because it's not really over, but COVID, when traveling was more normalized again, we went to PEI, and we ended up meeting um Eileen, and we picked up the spinning wheel. And then yeah, there's a whole other story here. I feel like I'm my ADHD partner now when I'm like, and then it kind of veers off here. But then we had to figure out how to ship it to Calgary, which we did end up doing with help from another fiber friend in PEI, Danielle, who I'm actually hoping to get on the podcast at some point, to talk about our sort of fiber connections as well as other connections as well. But yeah, so I now have the CPW wheel, who I've named Marilyn, and she can be a little opinionated about how she wants to spin, and I feel like that's, pretty on brand for the fuck lady. Um yeah. I know that's a weird rambling story, but I feel like it's kind of the most maritime story ever, where, my friend was cousin, like it's a very small world story. It's a very, very, very maritime story. And I'm very thankful that Jim and Marilyn came into my life, and that we had this fiber arts connection that we never really knew about, and that it's um continued on with me now owning her wheel and working on the same wheel that she worked with. And yeah, those connections are really, really important, I feel like, anyway. I feel connected to her every time I even look at the wheel. I remember her, I remember the stories, I remember the laughter, I remember um the not so subtle opinions on what either myself or Christopher should be doing with our lives. Um and yeah, I'm just so grateful that I had this surrogate grandmother in university who continued to be part of my life and continued to have such a profound impact on my life, including, like I said, me now working um, on her wheel. Um, yeah. So that's the story of how I got my CPW, the story of the fuck lady, the story of connections, small world, maritime connections. And those really are the connections that I feel hold us together, like the magic of string and thread, um, like in the fiber arts. Yeah. So thanks for listening. I have no idea how long I've been talking. I'm not paying any attention. This is sort of what's going to be Magic Threads. Hopefully next time I'm going to have some guests. Haven't figured out exactly who yet. I've got lots of ideas actually, but if you do have an idea of a story about connection in the fiber arts, let me know. I'd love to hear it. And yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for yeah, listening to me ramble and swear and share with you the story of my connections in the fiber world. Thanks so much.